amazing how good they were. Well, tonight we get to hear from Michael Martin. We heard from Chris Martin a little earlier today, and heard from Dan Martin while he was here, so you've been Martinized. And I told Mike to talk about whatever he felt was appropriate. Trumpet, which he does beautifully in the Boston Symphony, and this is pop season, or did you just finish?
Just finished.
Yay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pops is tough, not as bad as Christmas though.
No, only 5 shows a week instead of 12 or 14 or whatever it is when holidays. It beats working, but it's still busy.
So I'm gonna turn it over to him. He's the music arranger for Spirit of Atlanta, was the music arranger for Cavaliers for
6 years.
however many years we
6 or
were
7.
there. Yeah. And because of him and his approach to writing and a lot of really talented teachers, we brought a drum corps horn line that had been in disarray for several years back to prominence. In fact, in 19, the brass section was 3rd at DCI. So always proud of that and him, so on. And so, without me beating my gums anymore, this is Michael Martin.
Nice to see some of y'all for the first time, some not for the first time. But I thought I'd just go through, since you heard from the Martin brother who doesn't do any arranging already today, I thought I would talk about it. And just go through a little bit of Spirit's show for this year, which is entitled Up, Down, and All Around. Talk about kind of what our process was a little bit for coming up with the idea, selecting source material, and then taking through some of the arrangements and getting from kind of A to Z. When we meet as a design, and this show was supposed to be last summer, and then we were inactive for last summer, so we tabled it and still liked the idea enough that we really wanted to pursue it and develop it with this year's core, which is a little bit rare. A lot of other friends in DCI that are in the designer realm, including us at Cavaliers, we ended up bailing on our 2020 ideas for like either 21 or 22, and it's just funny to watch how like an inactive season kind of affects different creative minds in different ways. But we all really loved this idea, thought it was easy to access, and we could make it as layered as we want, or keep it as kind of surface level and just fun and easygoing as we wanted. We feel like we struck a really great balance of both. Like Up, Down, and All Around is first and foremost, like you get a very visual representation from it. But at the most simplistic level, when it came to choosing source material, we thought, okay, we could talk about height, we could talk about the differences like vertically in something like any music about flight. So the very first iterations of this had like 1,000 Airplanes on the Roof by Philip Glass, and Tame the Perilous Skies by Holsinger. And we thought that was maybe a little bit too literal, too on the nose. We wanted to stay with something a little more abstract. And so we did let like those words, up, down, all around, like influence some of the source material that we worked through that ended up staying in the show. But more than anything, Sal Salas, who's our program coordinator and longtime friend, family member of Spirit of Atlanta, wanted emotionally all of the words of the title to really come through. And that's where we sort of ended up in terms of pacing the show and getting the flow out. Like flow or soundtrack is what I like to call them sometimes. But let me see. I wonder if this logic file will load. It may not. So the very first thing that I do, the very first thing that I do in my process of figuring out, like, before I put notes, down on paper or in Sibelius, for the brass players to play at all, is I need to figure out what the movie soundtrack is, and that's where I begin. And then we end up going through as a team, and the very first iteration of this full pacing soundtrack that follows emotionally what the idea of the show is, what the scenes are. Everybody ends up voting on what they like, what they don't like, and Sal usually has the final say, and does this scene and do these different movements like portray what we need them to, and give them the opportunity visually to say things. So, nuts and bolts of basically just designing a show. But I'll show you this should play. Sort of like one of our early iterations of what the show soundtrack ended up being. If it will work. What year is it? 23? If I ended up just having to go through YouTube, I'll just do that. But is there Wi-Fi?
Yes.
What's the
There's
that one?
Yeah.
5G? That's probably why. I think once I connect to the internet, Dropbox will probably work. Is there a password?
It's supposed to be,
This works.
it's supposed to just work without one.
Sorry for the hold up.
Have any of you had trouble? I haven't.
I'm sure it'll take just a second. Yeah, so that works. Just a second. Yes, I know. Get me to talk amongst yourselves. I'm sure this will start playing at the most inopportune moment. So for now, I'll just go here. It's not black. That's not. So we, to start the show, like we floated between like a lot of different sort of classic rock ideas. Actually, not intentionally. Not trying to do some kind of like musically any kind of specific direction in terms of the style of music or the genre or anything like that. We really wanted the show to exist on its own. One of the things I learned from Daniel Wiles, who was the program coordinator at the Cavaliers when I was there as the arranger, and a great visual mind, musical mind, WGI Hall of Famer, is at all times he wants the show to, it could be a show about nothing and you would still love it and still appreciate it and still be able to understand, at least surface level, what you're supposed to understand. And that's sort of always my goal when creating any kind of soundtrack. And initially, the first version of the show had a tune by Alan Parsons Project, which I always chuckle at. I always think of Mike Myers in Austin Powers, when Dr. Evil goes back in time and calls his evil scheme the Alan Parsons Project. This really very evocative tune was how the show was going to start, and we ended up going away from this, but I think it's still worth it just to sort of for you guys to see the journey. So we went away from that because we felt like it had to be a purely electronic beginning to really pull off that effect and that feeling. What we took away from it was the ba-da-da-da, was very sort of cyclical and round, and then the bass line descends, and we liked that idea of being able to juxtapose just very simple musical devices. against each other, and separately or together. And so we started gravitating towards music that did that. And the introduction of the show actually ended up being entirely original music, with a couple of like electronic voiceover solo type quotes that you'll hear in the first like minute to 90 seconds. But entirely original music from myself and Matt Filosa, and Adam Lincoln. And it ends up being a lot of fun. It's like a very sort of rollicking, a little dark, and brooding introduction, but goes directly into a tune that Adam, our percussion arranger, pitched, called Metroliner. If you've not heard it, it's an absolutely terrific tune, and absolutely has like that kind of circular up and down all around. And again, like the thing we loved about this concept, the reason we wanted to stick with it is you can find the entire title or you can take any part of it and find it in all of the source material that we've chosen, just purely musically speaking, you know. And then Jamie Thompson, our drill designer and style, done an incredible job making sure that you see up, down, and all around at all times too. So we're excited about how cohesive the idea is, but this is the actual tune that we ended up using out of like this kind of this dark, brooding, intense introduction. It goes pretty seamlessly right into this tune, which is just a ton of fun. So that that like kicks pretty hard. It's very cool. It's like very easy. Tap your foot to. You go out whistling it, and that's always something we're looking for. So when it comes to putting that together and starting to put that on the page, figuring out how to write it in such a way that students are going to be able to play it. They're going to be able to march it, and not just be going all out the whole time. That is what ends up being my responsibility. And so we go through a lot of different iterations, obviously, like drafts and passing back and forth between each other. But the final product always, obviously, like the goal is to make it feel like the original made everyone else feel, in the room when we're talking about this idea. It does not want to connect to Dropbox right now. Let me try it this way. So forgive my percussion sounds. My virtual drumline library is not installed on this computer, but you'll get sort of the gist of it, I would say, for sure. Let's get rid of that. So this is after the introduction, which again ends pretty loud and dark. Actually, you know what? Since we're here, go back to that. Show you how we get from one to the other. Sorry. Got off the plane like 3 hours ago, so. So through the introduction, like we're mostly just providing this atmosphere that Sal and Jamie are able to create the visual landscape that they want to create. And so again, with apologies for what my percussion sounds actually are, I'll just highlight the snare drum part. This is based on, it's largely original, but